Long before there were heroes, there was fear. Fear of the dark water beyond the harbor. Fear of the caves where no torch could reach. Fear of the silence in a forest where the birds had gone quiet. The ancient Greeks did not need to invent monsters to explain the unknown. They only needed to listen to the stories their grandparents told, in the dark, when the fire had burned low. Stories of what waited beyond the edge of the map, of things that hunted in silence, and gods who watched from above, deciding who would live to tell the tale. Tonight, we go there. These are the 10 most terrifying creatures in Greek mythology, ranked. And by the end, you'll understand why some of them are still feared thousands of years later. Before we reach the official ranking, a few names almost made the list. The Sirens, whose songs lured sailors to their deaths on the rocks. No monster needed, just a voice too beautiful to resist. The Sphinx, guarding the road to Thebes, who devoured anyone unable to answer her riddle. Charybdis, the whirlpool monster who could swallow entire ships whole, 3 times a day without warning. And Ladon, the 100-headed dragon who never slept, coiled endlessly around a tree of golden apples, guarding treasure meant only for the gods. None of them cracked the top 10, but every one of them could headline a nightmare of their own. Now, let's begin. Number 10. The Stymphalian birds. Man-eating birds with bronze beaks sharp enough to pierce armor, and feathers they could launch like metal darts. They didn't just kill travelers near Lake Stymphalia. They swarmed in flocks so thick they blotted out the sun. It took one of Hercules' 12 labors just to drive them off. They had gathered on the lake in such numbers that farmers abandoned the surrounding fields entirely, too afraid to work the land. Some accounts claim their droppings alone were toxic enough to poison crops for miles. Hercules eventually used a bronze rattle, gifted by the goddess Athena, just to startle them into the open sky where he could strike. Number 9. The Crommyonian sow. Not every monster needed to be exotic. This was, quite literally, a giant wild pig, but one so vicious it terrorized an entire region of Greece, killing farmers and travelers alike, until the hero Theseus hunted it down on his journey to Athens. Locals near Crommyon feared her so much they refused to travel the roads alone, even in daylight. Some storytellers claim she was raised by a wicked old woman and grew monstrous from neglect and cruelty, a beast shaped as much by her upbringing as by nature. Theseus killed her not for glory, but simply because the road had to be made safe again. Number 8. The Erinyes, or the Furies. 3 ancient goddesses of vengeance, born from the blood of a castrated god. They didn't hunt monsters, they hunted people who broke sacred oaths or murdered their own family, chasing the guilty to the edge of madness with whips and shrieking curses that never stopped. Unlike the other creatures on this list, the Furies couldn't be killed, outrun, or bargained with. Once they chose their target, the pursuit was said to last until the guilty either confessed, went mad, or died. Even kings and heroes trembled at the thought of drawing their attention. Number 7. Cerberus. The 3-headed hound guarding the gates of the underworld. Cerberus didn't stop the dead from entering. His job was making sure nothing ever left. A serpent for a tail, a mane of writhing snakes, and a bark that could reportedly be heard from the world of the living. Only a handful of figures in all of mythology ever got past him. Orpheus lulled him to sleep with music, and Hercules, in his final labor, wrestled the beast into submission with his bare hands and dragged him, briefly, into the sunlight. Number 6. The Lernaean Hydra. Cut off one head, and 2 grow back in its place. This swamp-dwelling serpent guarded an entrance to the underworld, poisoning the air around it with toxic breath. Hercules only defeated it by burning each stump the instant he severed a head, the only way to stop the regeneration. Even its blood was lethal. Hercules later dipped his arrows in the Hydra's venom, turning every future kill into an instant, incurable death, a decision that would eventually come back to haunt him. If you've made it this far, you already know these next 5 get worse. Stick around because number 1 still gives historians chills. Number 5. Scylla. Once a beautiful nymph, cursed into a 6-headed monster with a ring of vicious dogs fused to her waist. She lived in a narrow strait opposite the whirlpool monster Charybdis, and sailors faced an impossible choice: risk her jaws or risk being pulled into the depths. Odysseus himself was forced to make that choice. Knowing he couldn't defeat her, he sailed close enough to lose 6 of his men to her jaws, accepting the loss rather than risking his entire ship to Charybdis instead. Number 4. The Chimera. A single creature stitched from 3, a lion's body, a goat's head erupting from its back, and a serpent for a tail. The goat head breathing actual fire. It terrorized Lycia until the hero Bellerophon killed it from the air, riding the winged horse Pegasus. No weapon could get close enough to strike without being burned alive. Bellerophon's solution was almost cruel in its cleverness. He lodged a block of lead on his spear and thrust it into the chimera's fire-breathing mouth, letting the creature's own flames melt the metal and choke it from within. Number 3. The Minotaur. Half man, half bull, born from a queen's unnatural union, and hidden away in a labyrinth so complex its own architect could barely navigate it. Athens was forced to send 14 young people into that maze every 9 years, sacrifices to feed it, until Theseus finally ended the cycle. The labyrinth was designed to be inescapable, even for those who survived the Minotaur itself. Theseus only found his way back out by unwinding a single thread from the entrance, a trick given to him by Ariadne, the king's own daughter. Number 2. Medusa. A single look into her eyes turned flesh to stone. Once a woman cursed by a jealous goddess, Medusa became the most feared of the Gorgons, living surrounded by the petrified remains of everyone who'd ever seen her face, until Perseus beheaded her without ever meeting her gaze. He achieved it only by watching her reflection in a polished shield, striking blind to her true form. Even after death, her severed head retained its power. Perseus later used it as a weapon, turning enemies to stone with a single glance. Number 1. Typhon. The deadliest creature in all of Greek mythology. A monster so powerful, even the gods fled Olympus in terror when he rose. 100 serpent heads, wings that blotted out the sky, and a voice that could scream like a god or roar like every beast at once. Only Zeus himself, hurling thunderbolts, was strong enough to bury him, trapped forever beneath Mount Etna, where he's still said to cause it to erupt. Typhon was so feared that even Zeus, king of the gods, briefly lost their battle before turning the tide. Ancient writers described him as the father of nearly every other monster on this list, meaning the creature at number 1 may be the true origin of everything that came before it. 10 creatures, one common thread. In Greek mythology, the real horror was never the creature. It was what happens when you finally have to face it. The Greeks didn't invent these stories to entertain. They invented them to explain why the world felt so dangerous, and why courage, even against impossible odds, still mattered. Which one would you least want to run into? Let me know below, and subscribe for more myths unpacked.